Presentation for around 30 minutes. Now, the session is Btrfs, Logical Volume Manager, and Snapper with Arvin, Schnell.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk about Btrfs, LVM, and Snapper, where at Btrfs and LVM I will concentrate on the snapshot features. So what is Btrfs? It's a relatively new file system for Linux. It was first supported in openSUSE 11.4. It has some outstanding features. It's an entirely copy-on-write file system, which means that it never overwrites a block on your disk. It always writes a new copy of it and then sets the metadata. It is resiliency. It has checksumming of data and metadata, and it has its included multiple device support. It can do RAID 0, 1, 5, and 10. You can even select different RAID types for your metadata and your data. And suppose you have a mirroring RAID on 2 disks, and during reading, Btrfs will always check that the checksum is correct, and if it detects a mistake, it will read the other copy of the data and hope that that's still correct, and then correct the mistake. It does this automatically always, but you can also run a scrubbing process, it's called, where it does this manually for you all over the whole file system. It also supports compression and deduplication. Deduplication means that it finds blocks in the file system that are identical, and then just keeps one copy of them, and the metadata points to the same block. So if you have many identical files, or at least partly identical files, then this can save you a lot of disk space. And, well, it also has, for example, it's optimized for solid-state disk. It has just that it sends out a trim command to the hardware so that the disk knows that it can that the block is no longer needed, and it can rearrange this on the flash drive. And especially interesting are these subvolumes and efficient snapshots, which I'll demonstrate soon. More or less, a subvolume looks like a directory in the beginning, and a snapshot is like a subvolume, but it already contains the content of the file system. So, for example, if you have your root file system, you can snapshot it, and then in a subvolume, and this subvolume will then look like your root file system. So what's the logical volume manager? So the logical volume manager has been rather long, more than 10 years, and it combines block devices into new block devices. So you can, for example, from 2 hard disks, you can create one block device which has then the size of both hard disks. And this is very flexible at runtime. You can add new block devices. If you plug a new hard disk into your system, you can extend this, and the resulting block devices called logical volumes, you can also resize them at runtime. You can also move data from one disk to another disk. I've done this once when I got an SSD at work. While the system was running, I was able to move the data from the hard disk to the new SSD. The logical volume manager also provides striping, mirroring, rate 4, 5, and 6. And this works without the underlying MD rate. So it's a different technique here. And a very new feature of thin provision of LVM is thin provisioning. It's in kernel 3.2. Here you have a pool of data, and your logical volumes are delayed. The allocation is delayed. So the logical volumes only need the space when you really need it. And this even allows, if overcommit, you can create logical volumes greater than your disks. And it also provides efficient snapshots. So here's a diagram how LVM normally looks. So in this example, there are 3 physical volumes, and those are combined into a volume group. That's the big thing in the middle. And then you create logical volumes, and within provisioning, this new in the right gray area, where you first have a pool and then your logical volumes. And there you have this thin provisioning feature. So on this computer, I have now used Btrfs for the root file system. So you can see my root file system has type Btrfs, and I can now start to list the subvolumes I have. So here we see the subvolumes we have created. Just has already created some subvolumes called temp, opt, and srv, and some in var. We create those because we don't want to snapshot them normally. There's no need to snapshot temp directory, for example. And I have another file system, home, where there are also some snapshots. Those are those created by Snapper. I will explain later. Now, as an example, I want to create a snapshot of the root file system. So I use this Btrfs command line tool again, subvolume, create, subvolume, snapshot, and then I give the root file system and /snap where the snapshot is created. So you see this was a rather fast operation. Now I can go into this directory or into the subvolume, snapshot, snap, and here I see my complete file system. And then snapshots can be read-only or read-writable. So that's what I wanted to show about Btrfs snapshots. So unfortunately, the support of thin provisioned LVM is a bit broken in 12.3. So I have to show this on the /SP3. Yeah, maybe I can show a bit more. For example, what I can also show in Btrfs, when I look at the root file system, I can show you that the home directory, for example, contains my home directory, and the snapshot there, does not exist, because only in one snapshot only contains one subvolume, not subvolumes within that. Okay, this takes a bit time to boot up. No network. Yeah, maybe that takes too long. So maybe I'll show that later on. So, but so now we have two technologies to create snapshots of your file system with Btrfs and LVM. Those are technically quite different, and you also have to use different tools to work with them. And it's also not very comfortable. You have to use this command line tool. If you create a snapshot, you can just say one directory, like what it's called, but you cannot save metadata with the snapshot. For example, why you created it, or some description, or who created it. So for this, we created a snapper, which is simply a tool to manage these file system snapshots. It was started about 2.5 years ago, and first included in openSUSE 12.1. It supports Btrfs and thin provisioned LVM. Snapshots can be created manually, and they are also created automatically in a timeline. So every hour a snapshot is created, and it's then cleaned up later. And this cleanup algorithm works this way that you have lots of snapshots in a short time. So, for example, you have 10 in the last day, and then the older ones, you have less of them. So, for example, another 10 for a month and another 10 in a year or something like this. And we have a command line tool and a Just graphical interface. Yes, and Btrfs is already configured. Or no, if you use Just to install your system with Btrfs as root, it will immediately install Snapper and configure it for your root file system. So we have in Btrfs one configuration per subvolume, and for each snapshot we can we save some metadata, the time and date, description, user who created this snapshot, user data, which is a free key value pair the user can set. Then we can compare snapshots. So you can see, for example, what has changed on my file system since yesterday morning or something like this. And we can revert those changes between snapshots. And internally, we distinguish between single pre- and post snapshots. Pre- and post snapshots always belong together. Those are, for example, created by Just. So when you start Just, one pre-snapshot is created, and when Just is done, another snapshot is created, a post-snapshot. And then Snapper compares those two snapshots and can show you the changes Just has made immediately. Okay, I will demo this then in a few minutes. And one new thing in openSUSE 12.3 is that we have a dbus interface for Snapper. Snapper was split between the server and the client. The server is only started on demand and does the operations only allowed by root. But other operations like this file revert is still done by the client. And you can give users access to those to Snapper that they can, for example, snapshot their own home directory. And this is already used now by libzip and Samba. So now I will make a short demo of Snapper. So first, I can list what configuration Snapper knows about. So I have one root for the root file system and home Schnell for the home directory. And now, for example, I can start Just 2. Remote and fiddle a bit with the system. So now I allowed Just to open remote administration. Maybe I don't know exactly what this is. So then I will look at Snapper again. I will list the snapshots. And now you see two new snapshots, number 4 and 5. And the description says Just remote. And now I can ask what has been changed between those two snapshots. Now the Snapper runs the comparison, which takes a few seconds. Yeah, maybe more than a few seconds. Yes, this is unfortunately still very slow. We have in /11 SP3, we have accelerated this by using a new feature of Btrfs called send receive, where Btrfs already can tell you the changes done. So now you see there's some init script, and those have been added. You see this with the plus sign, and the C means that the content of some files has changed. For example, etc/sysconfig display manager. Now we can just use Snapper again. Say, give me the difference. between the snapshots 4 and 5 of the file etc sysconfig display manager, and now you can see exactly what just has changed to your system. So you can use this for once to learn what just or other things do to your system, and you can also use it to revert changes. Now I can, for example, say snap here again, undo change, and then it will copy the file, now in this case just etc sysconfig display manager, from the first snapshot back into the system. So undoing your change, undoing the change just has done. The same happens when you use zipper, then also a snapshot is created in the beginning and in the end. So then you can see what files have been added, removed, and changed. We also have this in a graphics view using Just. You can, in this table, select then again snapshot 4 and 5, say show changes. On the left is a tree with all the files changed, and if I select one file, you see again the difference, now even in color. So this was now all done as the root user, but as I've said, it's also possible for a non-root user to use this new feature. So then I must say on which configuration I want to work. So I say config home Schnell, and I can say again list, and I see a few snapshots that were made by this timeline algorithm. And now I can, for example, create 2 snapshots actually, and I can specify a command that will be run. So I just touch a file, and now again 2 snapshots have been created, and with status I can again see the difference. So I see one file was created here. So that was the last demo. So that was the state in openSUSE 12.3. There are some new features already. We have support for ACLs and extended attributes, which has been provided by Red Hat. And I can say that, for example, Fedora 19 also now includes Snapper. We have another module, a PAM module called PAM Snapper, where you can create snapshots when the user logs in or logs out. And we have this Btrfs send receive. We use this for a faster comparison when using Btrfs. And one thing, so these 3 features are already implemented. And the next thing, rather important, is that we can, will check, at least I hope it will work, use the Btrfs quota groups to track the disk space used by the snapshots, and then whenever warn the user when they get very big or delete them dynamically. but this is still in development. So currently you have to watch your disk space frequently, that you don't run out of disk space. So then, one final slide. You can join SUSE. We are hiring. Yeah, talk to our colleagues at the booth or go to the web page. So one last, the web page, snapper.io, it contains, it's the central place for all links to the GitHub repository, where all the source code is. Snapper is, of course, open source, and it contains a tutorial, FAQ, packages for various distributions, including Debian, Ubuntu, and SUSE Fedora, and yeah, issue tracking system, everything that GitHub provides. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yes? This notebook has Btrfs, and I have another notebook with Btrfs. My workstation is still very old. I've not reformatted it in years, so it's still using X3 or X4 and XFS. Okay then, thanks a lot.